Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. I'm going through another stressful transition here at the beginning of this coming month. Honestly, it feels like my life is kind of nothing but stressful transitions at this point. So I decided to treat myself to an easy, breezy, amusing topic that I've been wanting to cover for a long time. The whole X is a social construct argument. I'm going to try not to address, or at least start off by trying not to address, whatever little variables you might wish to substitute for X in that statement, and just stick with the pure notion of a social construct as people use the term. I mean, let's be real, I'll probably get into a few of them by the end of the video just for example purposes, but let's just begin with the basics. Because this is effectively a misuse of words video, but not quite, let's start off by providing the accepted definition of the thing I'm critiquing. Quite simply, a social construct is an idea that has been created and accepted by the people in a society. More elaborately, the idea of social constructivism is effectively that humans make meaning of the world around them through their connection with the cultures and societies within which they exist. That is to say, our cultures and traditions influence the way we experience the world around us, and then as a result of growing up within a given culture, we tend to be more likely to continue to pass down those ideas and traditions, and the cycle becomes reinforced across generations. If you look at the concept in this way, it's not a wholly useless idea. I mean, there are reasonable examples of things that we could legitimately call social constructs by this definition. Let's take the concept of marriage. The idea that marriage includes one man and one woman intended to stay together until death do they part is indeed a social construct that is not an idea universally shared across the world. Realistically, it's not even an idea that is equally respected by all within the cultures where it is mainstream. There are many people who dislike the idea of being married to one person for their whole lives, people who dislike the idea of religion or the government getting involved in their relationship, or whatever other reasons people might dislike marriage. The point is, this is one example of something that you could point to and say, yes, this is a social construct by the definition that I posted up there. So what's the problem then? Well, there's kind of a chain of problems. First, I think there's this little niggling feeling I get in the back of my mind whenever I encounter some obtuse philosophical, sociological concept. It's not always an easy thing to explain, but I'll do my best. I envision a 16-year-old goth kid hanging out at a playground at midnight, looking out at the stars, writing poetry about how nobody can truly understand the depth of their emotions. They think they're being really deep and saying something profound that nobody else has thought of before. And you know what? I support them in that. I went through a phase like that. I'm sure a lot of us did. Gosh darn if that hormone-filled youthful emotionality isn't a fun thing to revel in for a while. Far be it from me to try to take that from anyone else. The thing is, for most of us, that is indeed just a phase. We come to realize we weren't really saying anything all that profound, and that in fact it was pretty egotistical of us to imagine it was. However, some people just kind of forget to grow out of that stage, and they continue on through life speaking as though they've bookmarked thesaurus.com and legitimately believe they are so brilliant that others could stand to learn from their genius. I'm not going to lie, that's a lot of what I'm getting out of this idea. I mean, for Pete's sake, just listen to this little snippet from Wikipedia. In his 1922 book, Public Opinion, Walter Lippmann said, "The real environment is altogether too big, too complex, and too fleeting for direct acquaintance between people and their environment. Each person constructs a pseudo-environment that is a subjective, biased, and necessarily abridged mental image of the world, and to a degree, everyone's pseudo-environment is a fiction. People live in the same world, but they think and feel in different ones." Holy smokes, is that a long way to go to simply say that people experience the world in different ways. Now, please don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying that we should try to only explain the world in the most simplistic of ways. Far from it. Instead, I'm trying to state that there is a difference between exploring complex concepts in such a way as to bring understanding and enlightenment to others, and needlessly complicating relatively simple ideas to make yourself sound more insightful and intellectual than you are. In the first case, you make intellectual concepts more accessible to people. In the second case, You obfuscate ideas and cause squabbling as people try to interpret whatever the hell it was they think you were trying to say via their own lenses through which they view the world. Wait, did I just make a social construct comment in a video about social constructs? Now, I think because of all this, and the nebulousness of the concept to begin with, a lot of people who use this term now are using it, well, incorrectly. That is, they're using it with the intention of being a pretentious, holier-than-thou intellectual looking down at you from on high to dismiss your baser worldly definitions of common concepts. Perhaps you've said something that they take exception with, either described a phenomenon or used a certain word in a certain context. And here they come to drop the hammer. But that's just a social construct! And all of a sudden whatever it was you said ceases to matter. Let's look at this from a few angles. What is it that any given person who uses this argument trying to say? Well, ultimately they're trying to say that because some distant tribe of 300 squatting in a bush in the nether regions of uncharted Asia may not subscribe to the exact parameters of the concept being discussed, it therefore means that the concept is useless and should not be relied upon. Of course, I exaggerate a little bit for comedic effect here, but their argument is usually some similar flavor to this. So as not to be accused of straw-manning, let me phrase the argument more charitably. Whatever concept it is you're discussing is not equally applicable to all humans in the world, and therefore you should stop acting as though it is immutable fact. When you say it like this, it almost begins to look like a reasonable statement, but nevertheless, it is still a pedantic one. First, if your definition of a social construct is focused on the fact that some people in the world experience things in a different way depending on the cultures within which they exist, then if you think about it, everything is a social construct, isn't it? Our language, our perceptions of the world, the kinds of lifestyles surrounding us. The fact that I call the sky blue instead of egret is a social construct. That we use certain medical procedures to treat certain conditions instead of others is a social construct. The fact that we live in sturdy concrete, wood, and brick buildings instead of mud huts is a social construct. It becomes such a broad, all-encompassing statement as to become entirely useless. To return to all of the philosophizing from before, if we accept on its face the idea that everyone experiences their own personal fictionalized version of the world, if we accept that everyone who exists has their own individual, fully unique experience unknowable by anyone else, then we cannot really trust that anyone has similar experiences to anyone. But at what point do we start to say that this is nonsense and that yes, there are ways that we as humans have created to express ourselves, language, arts, sciences, that other humans can view and understand and have a point of comparison to others? And not just a point of comparison to others, but a way to make sense about the world and help us understand the way things work. At what point do we start to say that if we insist on dismissing any concept as a fact of life for many people just because it does not apply equally to all, that we are losing a useful way to communicate amongst ourselves and are in fact isolating ourselves further? Now, let's look at a few examples of the way people use this. Gender is a social construct. Race is a social construct. Health is a social construct. Virginity is a social construct. Disability is a social construct. Time is a social construct. Things are social constructs just because we happen to use those specific words to describe them when we theoretically could have used other words. Now, you can offer critiques of these things all you like for whatever reason. These critiques might not necessarily be equally valid, but you can critique them. You know what is not a useful critique? Dismissing all of these concepts out of hand merely because they are an idea that society collectively agreed enough upon to create a word to describe them, at least at one point or another. It all just seems so needlessly reductive to me. Sure, there will be certain differences in the way individuals experience things, but I think that focusing on the minutiae like this is failing to see the forest for the trees. It can cause us to get bogged down in the theoretical and the philosophical and cause us to lose sight of both relevant similarities and relevant differences. Not only that, in a way, I think that if this kind of thing is overused too much or used in the wrong way, it can result in some negative mental health consequences. Someone I know gave me a related example where a group therapist said to the group, "Everything is subjective. Who cares what's true?" Does this not sound very defeatist? I think that it can be very demotivating to hear something like this because I legitimately believe that the pursuit of truth drives much of human growth and innovation. Not only that, but it is exceptionally isolating, as I said before. If nobody goes through the same thing as you, then nobody will understand your experiences, and nobody will have any relevant perspectives or advice to offer you. You are alone. But, thankfully, that's a lot of nonsense. You're not alone, and chances are very good that even if some people have not had the literal same experiences as you right down to the flavor of gum you were chewing at the time, they will have had experiences close enough to be able to offer their advice and to have it make sense to you. It's the same as with the idea of social constructs. Sure, not every culture is going to do things the exact same way we do them, but that does not then invalidate our ideas or traditions, validate theirs, or vice versa. I hope that by now, if we really want to have a discussion that actually matters, we can come up with something slightly more relevant than, "But not everyone believes literally exactly the same way we do, so therefore our ideas don't matter." Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.